Emily Petersmark playing guitar and singing.
And that back there is Mr. Dan Rickovitz playing the drums and singing.
You're listening to Rip and Common Sense Radio.
Right, where we take you well into the midnight hour with our special Art Bell Archives show happening tonight and every night this weekend, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Tune in as we open up the Art Bell Archives and dive into the lost classics of a vocal treasure. We take a look at those stories and we bring them up to date and we share them with you. We ask for your input and your shout-outs, your call-ins, as we go through the most amazing stories ever told. Tune in tonight and every night as we reinvestigate the Art Bell Archives live.
The Art Bell Archive Show.
Rip
7
and
p.m.
Rabbit Hole
Pacific,
is a
10/9
community-driven
Central.
radio.
RipandCommonSense.com.
At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rip and Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy. The captain has turned on the seatbelt sign.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Art Bell Archive live show. I'm your host, AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. Tonight, we explore the depths of space in an unusual and fantastic way, as we're going to take a close look at Mission Osiris, a mission to bring extraterrestrial samples from an asteroid back to Earth. We're going to take a look at all the theories and the possibilities. We're going to ask you for your feedback. Is this a good idea? We're going to get into it for sure down this rabbit hole. Buckle up your seatbelts, folks, because we're hitching a ride on a asteroid. That's tonight, December 12th, 2019. You know, back when I first started listening to Art Bell, I can only imagine what he would think about tonight's discussion. A shout out to all of you there in my YouTube land. Good morning or good evening, Daggy, wherever you might be. Thanks for making it to the live stream. Appreciate it. The following is a text of a fax that was sent to Art Bell on the 15th of what month? The 15th of December, 1997. I'll read a little bit of it here. It says, Dear Art, in an article published in 1971, John S. Lewis proposed and studied the possibility that Europa and other ice-covered bodies in our solar system might actually have a liquid water ocean under a crust of ice. Now, John Lewis was an author. And in 1997, he wrote the book Mining the Sky, Untold Riches from the Asteroids, Comets, and Planets. This book is available on Amazon. I highly recommend this particular instrument. Now, this isn't one of these fanatical topics that we like to discuss here on the Art Bell Archive Show. This tonight topic is a very real topic, but when it started back in the day in 1997, this John S. Lewis is a book that was published by the University of Arizona, and he was a planetary sciences professor emeritus. And he describes possible routes for accessing extraterrestrial resources, either for use on Earth or for enabling space colonization. So in Chapter 5, Asteroids and Comets in Our Backyard, he exhaustively catalogs the types of near-Earth objects, asteroids, and extinct comets whose orbits intersect Earth's. Assessing the harms likely from possible collisions with Earth, the Professor Lewis also wrote a previous book that dealt with the same thing, Rain of Iron and Ice. So on one hand, the collision with Earth and their potential profitable exploration on the other. And that is exactly what tonight's show is about. So when Art read this facts in 1997, there's no way he could have predicted what we'll be talking about tonight. Thank you, Biz Woofer, for enjoying and tuning in regularly. We appreciate it. Thank you. So we're going to start with an introduction to the asteroid Bennu. Okay? If you're not aware of what this mission of Osiris X is all about, you're going to learn about it tonight, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But let's listen to what NASA has to say this mission is about.
On September 8th, 2016, in Cape Canaveral, Florida, OSIRIS-REx began its journey, NASA's most ambitious sample collection attempt since the Apollo program. After 2 years, including a gravity assist from Earth, this spacecraft arrived at its destination, asteroid Bennu. As OSIRIS-REx drew near, Bennu grew in detail from a few tiny pixels to a surprisingly rugged world, littered with giant boulders. This spacecraft has used its instrumentation to map the asteroid from all sides, mapping it in unprecedented detail. The mission team has been analyzing the data, scouring Bennu's surface to select the best sample site. Now, with just months to go before sample collection, the team has narrowed its target down to 4 potential sites.
So those 4 sites, up until today, were potential sites, and they were Osprey, Kingfisher, Nightingale, and Sandpiper. And today, NASA actually made their announcement of exactly where they're going to land. This was made today by Principal Investigator Dante Loretta, who we reached out to for an interview request, and we have not heard back from him yet. So it's possible that we could have him on a upcoming show. Dante Loretta announces the chosen site that they selected on this asteroid to land the spacecraft, gather a sample, and bring it back to Earth. So out of those 4 sites, Osprey, Kingfisher, Nightingale, and Sandpiper, here is what Dr. Loretta announced.
Yeah, thanks, Gray. As you can see from the map of the asteroid behind us, when we first got there, the most obvious feature that we saw were these abundant, very large boulders, and overall a rough and rugged surface, very different than what we designed the spacecraft to sample. We were looking at sampling areas that were 25 meters in radius across, and quite honestly, I thought it was going to be obvious from the first images where the sample regions were and that it was going to be a straightforward site selection, and it was nothing of the sort. So the first thing to do was to complete the global characterization of the asteroid. We used our camera systems, we have laser altimeters for getting the topography, and we have several spectrometers for analyzing the mineralogy and the chemistry. And the science team did an amazing job of synthesizing all of that information and making a whole series of maps of the asteroid's surface. And then we went through several different ways to characterize it. We had the team looking at the imagery and the other data to pick areas that looked sampleable. We used machine learning algorithms. We also wrote specific software to find flat areas on the asteroid surface. And we also crowdsourced some of this information out to get the community involved in helping us select the sites. After that process, we actually had 50 different areas on the asteroid surface that looked like they might be interesting for us. And so I set it up kind of a tournament-style bracket. We ultimately got down to our Sweet 16 and then the Elite 8 and to the Final Four where we are right now, about to crown the champion and the runner-up. I'll say that just thinking that we're going to get this sample back to Earth sends chills down my spine. So the winner of the OSIRIS-REx Site Selection Championship is the Nightingale site.
All right. Make some noise, audience.
So the Nightingale site is the site that they chose and decided to collect. Now let's put a 1 in the chat room if you can hear, because I heard and saw a comment that there was no sound. Now I know that clip was very quiet, so I apologize. Again, sometimes the volume on these clips are as max as they can get on. Okay, good, right on, he says. So you guys should be able to hear the rest of the clips. Hopefully they're not as quiet as that one, but you may be doing a little adjusting on your volume, and I apologize for that. So as you can see, they narrowed down the 4 sites to, somebody put it 2, that's funny. They narrowed down the sites to the Nightingale site. And of course, like I said, this mission is going to collect samples, and collected samples will come from that particular area of this asteroid. Now, we're not talking about a very big asteroid. We're going to get into the size of it in just a few moments. And the Osiris mission, OSIRIS-REx spacecraft, seeks to answer the questions that are central to the human experience. Things like, where did we come from? What is our destiny? Asteroids, they are the leftover debris from the solar system formation process and can perhaps answer these questions for us and teach us about the history of the sun and our planets, including our own, Earth. The OSIRIS-REx spacecraft is traveling to this far-off asteroid Bennu, which is a carbon-based asteroid that may contain record of the earliest history of our solar system. Bennu may contain the molecular precursors to the origin of life and the Earth's oceans. Bennu is also one of the most potentially hazardous asteroids, as it has a relatively high probability of impacting Earth. Now, that's coming from science and NASA, and they are predicting the high probability of an impact. Now, they're also saying that that impact will occur late in the 22nd century. So someplace around January 1st, 2101, and the end of December 31st, 2020, there could be a probable impact with this asteroid. So 99 years, 100, 200 years from now, this is something that we won't be around to see unless there's some major changes in our health and our ability to live that long. But anyways, OSIRIS-REx will determine Bennu's physical and chemical properties, which will be critical to know in that event of an impact mitigation mission, perhaps in the future. So asteroids like Bennu contain natural resources, which is exactly what Dr. Lewis wrote his book about, mining the asteroids for. Now, these natural resources we're speaking about are like water, okay? In December 11th of this year, water was indeed found on this asteroid. So the discovery of water adds support to the idea that comets and ancient asteroids like Bennu could have brought water and possibly organic molecules to this Earth. Those components together are needed, absolutely essential building blocks for life. So let's listen now to what Danny Dell'Agostina has to say about this particular aspect of the mission.
Its orbit is in close proximity to our own planet, and it was fairly accessible for us to send a spacecraft there, so that's one reason. But because of its close proximity to planet Earth, it's also a potentially hazardous object, and so by sending a spacecraft there and flying in formation with Bennu for over 2 years, we're going to get a much better sense of Bennu's orbit and be able to better predict whether or not it is a hazard in the coming decades and centuries. But finally, Bennu is composed of water-bearing minerals, and that was a discovery we made very early on in the mission. And there's early indications that it might have organics as well, so we think that Bennu looks a lot like the objects that might have delivered the precursors to life to early Earth. And so it's also exceptionally scientifically exciting to be in orbit around this surface.
Scientifically exciting indeed, but wait. Now, this is a wild, wild thought. The precursors of life on this planet brought here by asteroids? Are we perhaps not Earthlings? Are we the extraterrestrials? Are the samples that are going to get collected and brought back here to Earth going to tell a new story of our creation? Because if you listen to that closely, may contain the precursors of life on this planet, then one could deduct that we are not Earthlings, perhaps. We are not native to this planet, which is a very curious thought. So you can put a 1 in the chat room if you think we're extraterrestrials and brought here on the back of an asteroid. But more important, what Danny is pointing out is close proximity. Whether or not it has a collision path with Earth. Now, I read asteroid collision is what formed the Himalayan mountains. And it is also a theory that a meteorite or an asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs and brought Superman from Krypton. So perhaps this intriguing thought will be explored further in detail, perhaps even proved in the year 2023, when these samples from this collection site, Nightingale, return back to Earth from the asteroid that in the 22nd century could be responsible for major changes to this planet. In the future, these asteroids may one day fuel exploration of the solar system by robotic and crewed spacecraft. Now, that spacecraft that's manned could be there for the purpose of destroying an asteroid's path to our own destruction. Now, notice I said crewed spacecraft. I meant not crude as in a crude, but as in a manned spacecraft, which reminds me of that movie. I think it was called Asteroid, as a matter of fact. 1998 movie, perhaps it was called Apocalypse. It was Bruce Willis. And a massive meteor shower destroys the orbiting space shuttle. And before entering the atmosphere, these meteor showers bombard New York City. NASA discovers that meteors were pushed out of the asteroid belt by a Texas-sized asteroid that, in this movie, will impact the Earth in 18 days, causing an extinction-level event that will wipe out all of the planet. NASA scientists plan to drill a deep shaft into the asteroid and plant a nuclear weapon into it that, when detonated, will split the asteroid in two halves, that it will fly safely past Earth. Now, this is a 1998 movie, folks. This is 1997 was when this fax came to art. This was a popular discussion back then, and even turned into a movie in 1998. So, obviously, NASA contracts Harry Stamper, who is considered the best deep sea driller in the world, for the assistance. And Harry departs on this mission with his crew to go up to this asteroid, stick some sort of device on it, and blow it up. And of course, you know, he has to sacrifice himself because the mission almost goes awry, and to save humanity, you know, he successfully pushes the button at the last second, and he detonates this nuclear weapon and splits the asteroid in two at the cost of his own life, and both halves fly safely past Earth. Now, it seems far-fetched, but it sounds that this movie is a freakish foreshadow of what may actually be reality 100 years from now. So I support this mission, I think, of bringing these samples back to Earth for the inevitable study of how we can protect this planet for future generations to come from this type of impact. So the mission objectives of OSIRIS-REx, you know, the key science objectives, in addition to comparing their observations at the asteroid to ground-based observations that they've done over years, they aim to return to Earth a sample of Bennu's surface. And of course, they've already mapped the asteroid. They announced today, Nightingale, where they're going to land or make their attempt to land. And back in the 1990s, Art Bell raised the question during these types of discussions, which perhaps we should be raising again today. He often would raise this particular question with guests like Richard C. Hoagland and people like Lewis. Is this a good idea? Is this safe to be bringing these types of samples back to Earth? And rightfully so. Like I said, that's a very real question. We're not actually being asked. It is really important to know the side effects. And that's our shout out question for tonight. If you don't know how to do that, if you haven't been here during the break, we're coming up at the end of the hour on a break, you can visit our website. There's a little red button at the bottom of the website where you can send us a 30-second shout out. And we'd like to hear from you. Do you think bringing samples back from an asteroid is a good idea? If so, or if not, tell us why in 30 seconds. Send in your shout out, and we will be playing them on air here before the end of the broadcast. Now, backstage guest listeners with me tonight are here. We've got Z Rabbit and Will. Are you guys there?
Yes, we are.
Great to have you on the program, our guest listeners. If you'd like to be a guest listener on the show backstage, you can send us a request to rippandrabbithole@gmail.com. Guys, you've been listening to the program so far. What do you think? Is this a good idea? Should we be bringing extraterrestrial samples to Earth?
In my opinion, I don't think it's a good idea because there's a lot of other elements, otherworldly elements that you could bring to the planet. And we don't know how it would react because they've done like experiments with that, like sending bacteria into space and it was like stronger and stuff. So what if there's like super bacteria that we don't know of?
Yeah, and that's what Flapjack Clark in the YouTube chat is also saying, like alien diseases, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a scary thought. And when you think about, the ability to kind of go back in time to the beginning of our Earth, the beginning of life, and think, wow, we're the extraterrestrials? This isn't our planet? That's kind of a mind-blowing thought, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing if you think about it like that.
It's truly mind-boggling stuff. Now, an active asteroid is what they've declared Bennu. An asteroid Bennu, prior to this declaration, they didn't know if it was either alive or dead. And Wired released a headline that said, Asteroid Bennu is neither alive nor dead. It's a space zombie roaming through the solar system, sneezing out small rocks for a reason that is not yet known. So, of course, back in January, the navigation cameras that are on board on OSIRIS-REx captured 3 injection events that each spewed about 100 centimeter sized asteroid particles out into space. The spacecraft was also dedicated a significant number of particles orbiting Bennu in clouds, which they described as gnats. So sneezing, maybe that's that alien bug or flu that you're talking about. Let's hope it doesn't bring an extraterrestrial flu. So what could we learn? We're going to find coming up in just a few moments. We are at the bottom of the hour, so we are going to just take a break in just a few moments, and we'll be back to continue the rest of this discussion with our backstage guest listeners, Will and Z Rabbit, as well as all of you out there in Radio Land and YouTube Land. So we'll be back in just a moment. If you joined us a few weeks ago, we gave away a Heron Elite gift. Our friends at Heron Elite offered an origami lamp for giveaway. We did a reverse speech challenge that night, and we ended up giving that lamp away to one listener in Maine. Well, Heron Elite has decided to do that giveaway again. They're going to get it to you just in time for Christmas. Here's how you have that opportunity. You can send a photo to rippandrabbithole@gmail.com of where you would put your Heron Elite lamp. Now, this is a really cool lamp, and if you'd like to see it, I've included a link to it in the show notes listed below. Just click on Heron Elite Origami Lamp, watch the video there, and take a look at how cool that lamp is. Think about where you would put it. Take a photo of that spot and send it to rippandrabbithole@gmail.com. We will be announcing the recipient of the origami lamp. In our Hidden Earth show, we will announce the recipient. So send your emails soon, before Sunday night. Send them before Sunday night to rippandrabbithole@gmail. Very simple to do. Just take a photo of where you would put this lamp if you want it. It's coming to you before Christmas, absolutely free of charge, shipping included. What an offer. So take advantage of that while you still can. Christmas isn't the only thing right around the corner. Of course, New Year's 2020 knocking on the door. We're going to be here with our New Year's Eve predictions show. So just like Art Bell in the theme of art, he would take on air predictions for the following year. And this year, we're going to start that tradition on New Year's Eve. So be thinking as the days and weeks creep closer on a potential prediction that you could make to us. We'll monitor that prediction and come back the following year and find out if it was a ding or a bonk. A fun tradition, a yearly tradition Art Bell would do on his program that we're going to implement in our show here as well. Quite excited about that. Curious to see what you can predict. You can get a head start on that by using the shout-out button at the bottom of Rippin' Rabbit Hole. You can record up to a 30-second message every hour. So go ahead and get started and send us your predictions and shout-out. We'll use them on that air broadcast. Perhaps tonight was the first exposure you had to the discussion of Mission Osiris-Rex. It's an exciting one, and that's where we're using the shout-outs tonight to ask, is this a good idea? Should we be bringing these samples back to Earth? Like I said at the bottom of every page at Rippin' Rabbit Hole, little red microphone. You can send us up to a 30-second message per hour right here to the studio, and we'll play it on air. We want to hear your thoughts. Is this a good idea? If so, or if not, tell us why in 30 seconds or less. We want to hear from you.
As NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft neared its target, Bennu, the asteroid grew in detail from a few tiny pixels to an incredibly high-resolution image. OSIRIS-REx confirmed the asteroid's basic shape, which was originally observed in 1999 by ground-based radar at Arecibo Observatory. What scientists didn't expect was just how rough and boulder-filled the asteroid would turn out to be. While it can be difficult to fully grasp Bennu's unfamiliar surface, it's helpful to understand the scale of what you're seeing here. In this image, the brightest boulder is the length of a horse, and the large boulder in this image is the width of a soccer field. Another challenge for the mission is the asteroid's small size and weak gravity. This means that OSIRIS-REx needs to fly daringly close to the surface in order to enter into orbit. With its orbital A phase, OSIRIS-REx successfully entered the closest ever orbit for a spacecraft, setting a Guinness World Record in the process. Then, 6 months later, it beat its own record during its orbital B phase, and approached to within a few hundred meters of the rocky surface. Because OSIRIS-REx flew so closely over the surface during orbital B, the team was able to map the topography and shape of Bennu better than we have our own moon. In addition to mapping asteroid Bennu, OSIRIS-REx plans to collect and return a sample back to Earth. To do that, the spacecraft will carefully tag the surface of Bennu. The OSIRIS-REx team has selected 4 possible sample sites for the mission: Osprey, Kingfisher, Nightingale, and Sandpiper. The spacecraft has been closely imaging these sites from different angles to select the best touchdown spot for OSIRIS-REx. What was originally envisioned as a smooth and easy touchdown on Bennu's surface has become a complex endeavor to tag a small, crowded space on the asteroid, an area no larger than a few parking spots, by mid-2020. The OSIRIS-REx team has already pushed the boundaries of scientific exploration, going from ground-based radar images all the way to being a few hundred meters from the asteroid's surface, and is now mere months away from a sample collection attempt.
Truly remarkable science. Tonight, Mission Osiris is opening your eyes to the very real possibility that extraterrestrial life could be visiting our planet in 2023. And perhaps we are the extraterrestrials. Will we find our own DNA makeup up there? Who knows? Now, it's not a guarantee. that these samples are going to make it back to Earth. But the brilliant minds that are behind this mission are going to see to that fact that they do make it back here the best they can. And again, before we broke, we were talking about the possibility of, bringing an extraterrestrial flu. Some people in the chat room joking, achoo, that's one big achoo, that's for sure. Somebody else commenting that we need to get the patents on special protection suits, coming from Daggy. Happy shifting. That is a wonderful idea. Let's get the international patent filed for that tonight. As we heard in that little NASA clip, there were these 4 sites that they were thinking about dropping and collecting samples from. Today it was announced by NASA Live that Nightingale will be the selection site where they'll grab these samples. And there's some pretty interesting, challenges to that particular site in itself. But like I said, we're not talking about a large item. We're talking about, a asteroid that's moving, and this mission Osiris spacecraft is in its orbit. It's going to bounce down, grab its samples, and then blast off on its way back to bringing those samples back to Earth. So let's listen again to how Danny Dell'Agustina, I'm sorry if I slaughter your name, she is the image processing lead scientist for the program. Let's hear how she describes its size.
Bennu can tell us a lot about other asteroids in a number of ways, but something that sticks out is earlier this year we discovered Bennu is what we call an active asteroid. And so that means there is mass that is actively being ejected from the surface of Bennu. And we have seen similar activity on larger asteroids through telescopic observations, but we haven't seen this sort of activity at the low energies that we observe on Bennu. So it's giving us a better sense of the range of active asteroids that exist in the solar system. Just to give some perspective for the range of energies that we see these sort of ejection events, if you were to snap a cracker in half, the energy release there is comparable to the ejection events that we're observing on the asteroid.
So again, that's Danny explaining not how big it is, more about how it's ejecting its, surface, and these sneezes of boulders are coming off. Now, imagine the challenge that these drone pilots, if you will, these spacecraft pilots from Earth, have to go through with this kind of a asteroid firing, rockets off at it. So the likelihood of destruction is perhaps, very high, although we wish them the best of success in their mission. Or do we? Do we really want this stuff coming back to Earth? And again, that's our shout-out question of the night. So now let's listen to the description of exactly how big Bennu is.
Yeah, so the primary thing that we are looking for is the presence of sampleable material. We're also very interested in whether or not the site is safe. But from my perspective as a scientist, I'm very interested in whether or not these sites might have organic material or things that we think are similar to the precursors to life that were eventually delivered to Earth. Is there anything you want to add about the safety?
From my perspective, our number one goal is to keep the spacecraft safe while navigating down to these potential tag sites. And so we're interested in the fact that there are some of the sites have very large boulders in the vicinity of them and smaller rocks within the area we're trying to contact that could be potentially hazardous to the spacecraft. So we've had to take precautions in order to keep the spacecraft safe.
Again, no discussion of the size there. I was mistaken. I must not have grabbed that particular clip. I will put in the show notes, and I will link after for rebroadcast to the photo. And the way it was described at the NASA event today was that this is about the size of the Empire State Building. So it's not actually a small, but yet very small rock out in outer space. Incredibly challenging. I'm asking my guest listeners backstage, what do you think about the mission overall? I mean, it should be applauded, right? What they're doing is pretty damn cool.
Overall, I think so. I really think they should be careful about what they bring back.
I couldn't agree with you more. And again, like I said, Art Bell posed that question when this topic would come up, long before the reality of an unmanned mission, excuse me, an unmanned mission collecting samples and bringing it back to Earth. And as we'll hear a little bit later, this isn't the first time that samples, have returned from outer space. But this is a pioneer mission to a foreign object, right? You would consider Bennu to be a foreign object.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Extraterrestrial in nature.
Possible.
Yeah,
if
it's
there's
extraterrestrial.
Is there any life on it? I don't know.
Well, there's water on it. So by deductive reasoning,
yes.
it contains the elements. So I don't know. I don't want the extraterrestrial flu. That's for sure, as these people are pointing out in chat room. Let's go ahead and listen now to how long they've been observing this. This has been observed for quite some time. And you're going to hear Dr. Lori, who's a team member, speak about her thoughts of Bennu.
We've been observing Bennu now for about 20 years. First observed using ground-based telescopes. And then over that 20-year period, we've continued to observe the asteroid using ground-based and space-based observations. And then over the last year, of course, we've been able to observe using the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft. But all of those measurements and observations are remote sensing observations. They're done from a distance. And there really is just no substitute for being able to actually pick up some of that material from the surface and bring it back to Earth. By bringing it back, that allows us to use the full capabilities of all of our state-of-the-art technologies and laboratory facilities to analyze those samples, to answer some of the really big questions that we have that Danny was talking about when she was sitting here. And not only can we answer those questions using our facilities today, but we'll actually preserve most of the sample for all of the generations to come, that they can then use new facilities and new instrumentation that we haven't even dreamed of yet.
Oh, great. We're going to preserve these samples for generations to come. This is exciting stuff. Don't get me wrong. And of course, NASA is very intelligent. They have a quarantine process. But how do you quarantine something that you have no idea what it is? I mean, we're talking about the what ifs here. There's a lot of them, as you pointed out, gentlemen, backstage. The what ifs, there's some sort of an alien superbug. And of course, Daggy commenting in chat that my cough, I'm already infected. It's already reached me, right? So when you think about the collection and quarantine, what if there's an alien that exponentially grows rapidly when it's exposed to our atmosphere? What if? Are those what ifs that we should be gambling with?
I mean, there's always the off chance that there is something weird like that, but I don't think something like that will happen.
I hope something like that will happen.
You want it, Z Rabbit and Willie Rabbit. You don't.
No, something like that would be terrifying because we know nothing about it, and then it's there. That would be
okay. So
crazy.
Is it more terrifying than the asteroid colliding with Earth and bringing these samples
up there to drill it and split it in two?
Well, again, like the movie,
he's done it
very
once.
well become reality. But the question there is, is that risk worth it? And if you're in chat, you can share your thoughts with us too. Let us know, what is it? is it worth it to bring these samples back, to investigate them, to know as much as we can about this particular asteroid and others like it, for the perhaps safety of the destruction of our planet? Or is it best to just allow those samples to go on their way, and if they happen to make it to Earth, so be it, through natural selection or natural selection? You know, it's an interesting question that we're posing here. However, no matter what the case, we want to make sure that these scientists don't water it after midnight, right? Like gremlins, because who knows? Now, like I said, it could be possible wise investment for our future, as the scientists are exclaiming, perhaps new resources, perhaps new materials, new elements that are far more precious than the precious elements that we have here and know of here on Earth.
That might help us unlock some of our past, if you will.
It's a risk that me personally, I would be willing to take if it means to postpone the destruction of our planet.
I think it's definitely a wise move, and I'm glad that we have smart, educated leaders behind the project that are doing fantastic job. Either way, my top hat's off to them for the remarkable achievements that they've been able to do so far, and of course what's going to come down in the future. So you can share your thoughts in chat. Nicole is saying, ha, 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 no watering after midnight. Nope. She got the gremlin reference that she suggested. Thank you, Nicole, our listener out there. What will we learn directly from these samples if they make it back to Earth? That's a really, really good question, and we're going to listen to what NASA hopes we will be able to learn from these samples making it back to Earth.
So Benny is actually going to address several major questions, and three big ones in particular. First off, you heard, or you said earlier, that Bennu we think is a really old object that's really a remnant and preserved from the very earliest parts of our solar system. So by looking at those samples, we'll get insights and information telling us about what conditions were like when the solar system formed. And then Danny talked about how we think there are hydrated minerals and perhaps organic molecules on the surface. And by looking at those, we'll better understand how those types of materials were delivered to Earth and perhaps were the seeds for how life actually began to form on Earth back in the earliest times. And then finally, it's also going to help us better understand what types of resources might be available on these asteroids that are out there, that as we start to take human exploration beyond the moon and start to go other places, there may be resources there that may be of use to us in the future.
Now, I like Bizwoofer's suggestion in chat. I'd say do a preliminary finding on the International Space Station before bringing it to Earth first. Isn't that what the International Space Station is for? Bizwoofer, that's a great suggestion. I know I kind of had that same thought. The reality is that this asteroid is really old. It's like since the beginning of our solar system old. It's debris from that event. So these insights she speaks of and that NASA hopes to gain are truly remarkable options for us to explore in 2023 when these things make it back. The minerals, she mentions organic molecules, which to Z Rabbit's point could be new medicine, new cures for perhaps, illnesses and diseases. So maybe this alien extraterrestrial sample that brings this, somewhat jokingly flu to Earth could also bring its anti-venom or its cure. And along with it could be the cure for several diseases that we're faced with in this world today. So from those points, I agree with Willie Rabbit that, yes, we should take that gamble. And of course, the origins of life is an exciting. What if it's worse than Ebola? I absolutely agree. What if? And I hope that NASA's understanding of the containment of these samples is in line with that question, Bizwoofer, because I have no idea. I know nothing about space. I'm relying on these people to do what they're doing, but I wasn't asked. We weren't asked the question, is this a good idea? And I think, that's the important note here. And it's good for us to talk about this because without discussion on this, it just happens. And then all of a sudden, we have no way to look back in time and say, we told you so. And if that is the case, some alien flu is released on Earth, I'm going back to Thursday, December 12th, 2019, and I'm documenting Bizwoofer's comment and his suggestion as an Earthling to take this to the International Space Station first. Do exploration on it out in outer space before you bring it in to our atmosphere. So top hats off to you. That's a wonderful suggestion, Bizwoofer. So now let's listen to how Apollo and that mission also brought samples and the thought process of collecting samples from other planets. And it sounds like in the future, this is going to be like the author we spoke about at the beginning of the show spoke about in 1997. This is a new mining industry of mining space for what we can find.
Absolutely. So, of course, the Apollo missions were the first missions to actually bring samples back. We get natural samples all the time, of course, with meteorites that come through the atmosphere. But the Apollo missions brought those samples back. We're still analyzing those samples today, 50 years later. We just opened up some pristine samples a few months ago, or just trying to look at those with our new technologies, as I was saying.
So, again, going back to that suggestion of testing this stuff and investigating this in the vacuum of space first before bringing it into our atmosphere is absolutely wonderful because these samples have made it back safely. Apollo, we just heard, brought back samples. It's not the first time, but however, we're speaking about meteorites that delivered samples naturally and went through a burn-off process of entering our atmosphere. And it's logical to assume that any kind of extraterrestrial bacteria would have most likely perished in entering, and some of the minerals and some of the dust that remains is there, unless it's on the inside, which is perhaps their suggestion of how we got here aboard one of these ancient asteroids as well. But the reality is that, meteorites burn up. The moon isn't a foreign object to us. It's our moon. So Mars isn't. I'm a little freaked out about even bringing samples back from Mars, but it seems like that's going to take quite some time. So why the Nightingale? Why did NASA select it? And why did Dr. Dante Loretta, suggest Nightingale as their potential site? Very interesting. Again, Dr. Loretta is the professor of planetary science and cosmochemistry at the University of Arizona's Lunar and Planetary Laboratory. He's an expert in near-Earth asteroid formation and evolution, and he is the leader of NASA's OSIRIS-REx asteroid sample return mission. So let's listen why he chose this particular site, Nightingale, why he and his team, I should say. He's got a wonderful team.
On September 8th, 2016, in Cape Canaveral, Florida, OSIRIS-REx began its journey.
Nope, that's not the clip. I may not have that clip. That was the OSIRIS-REx. Oh, well. They chose it because of its particular sample collection area. There's a lot of good potential, and that particular area is in a crater itself. So it's somewhat protected. And as Biz Woofer points out, those robots and those tools that will go down and collect that sample and bring it back, they're looking at that area as a very, good place to start. So I think I don't have the actual clip of him saying. It's unfortunate, but I really don't believe that I have it. Nope, I don't. Either way, Dr. Loretta is a fantastic speaker, as you heard him earlier in the hour. He and his team leading this, potentially hazardous near-Earth asteroid survey and mission to collect its samples and bring it back. Wild stuff. My guest listeners there tonight, Z Rabbit and Willie Rabbit, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Any last words you'd like to share with our audience from what you've heard and learned this evening?
Well, I think it's very cool how NASA's doing all this stuff in space, but I just hope they're careful when doing it and listen to Biz Woofer. Test it in the ISS first and use robots and stuff before you bring it here. But other than that, it's pretty cool what we could do if these missions are successful.
It truly is exciting times we live in. Willie Rabbit and Z Rabbit, top hats off to you for joining us. Thank you so much. If you'd like to join us backstage for an episode, you can do that. You can request access by sending an email to ripponrabbithole@gmail.com. That's RIPON rabbithole@gmail.com. You can come backstage and take part in the discussion. Now, it is a wild ride, and these are questions that definitely need to be asked. And if the Nightingale site is not adequate, will there be a backup?
So we also have a backup site. The runner-up is the Osprey site. That's the 20-meter crater near the equator. We know we can get in there. It doesn't have the hazards that Nightingale does, but it also may be more challenging to collect a sample, but we think the lower hazards makes it the right choice for the backup.
I was incredibly excited now to have this site selection decision, and Nightingale is an exciting site to go into because of the challenges it's posing. And the team has really risen to the challenge, both to come up with how we would make the decision about the best site, but also to convince ourselves that we can actually get there and navigate the spacecraft successfully. So the team, I think, is really excited to be able to move forward and put all of our attention towards tagging at the Nightingale site.
No matter what you think about the possibilities of our future in bringing these samples back to Earth, we take top hats off to this mission and these people behind it. An incredible work of space and science. That's it, folks. We did it. We spent another Thursday night together. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. I'm glad you take the time to interact with us. If you happen to miss a show or an episode, you can always go back and watch on demand at our website at ripponrabbithole.com or here on YouTube at Rippin' Rabbit Hole. Tomorrow night, Friday night, triskaidekaphobia, the fear of the number 13, a fitting topic for Friday, December 13th. We're going to deal with that number, or unlucky number, as some people think, as well as many other phobias in our triskaidekaphobia episode. That's tomorrow night, if I can say it. Friday night, December 13th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then Saturday night, mind reading. Both of those nights, both Friday and Saturday nights, we're going to do open lines, give you a chance to call in and share your thoughts on both of those subjects. And we'll end our weekend of broadcasts Sunday night with a Hidden Earth episode. We're going to look at lost effigy mounds of North America. It's a great weekend of content. We hope you subscribe and come back and hear us again. I'm your host, AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Until we meet again, take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
Mr. Rabbit makes his way through the leaves. He tries to hide his very long ears under a big hat 'cause he wants to be incognito. You try to talk to him, you see him disappear. Call him Mr. Rabbit. Simply Mr. Rabbit. You've never seen such a creature like this. A human body and a rabbit face. They call him Mr. Rabbit. Mr. Rabbit.
Once there was an old man living in an old house down by the lake. Rumor says the man was hunting for rabbits just for fun. Since the day the rabbit disappeared for a while, then came back and cast a spell over the old man. So he looks like a rabbit too now.
Such a creature like this, a human body and a rabbit face. Oh, they call him Mr. Rabbit. Oh, Mr. Rabbit. Oh, Mr. Rabbit. Oh, they call him Mr. Rabbit.
You're listening to Rippin' Common Sense Radio.
That's right, where we take you well into the midnight hour with our special Art Bell Archives show happening tonight and every night this weekend, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Tune in as we open up the Art Bell Archives and dive into the lost classics of a vocal treasure. We take a look at those stories and we bring them up to date and we share them with you. We ask for your input and your shout outs, your call-ins as we go through the most amazing stories ever told. Tune in tonight and every night as we reinvestigate the Art Bell Archives live.
The Art Bell Archive Show. 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, rippincommonsens.com.